Paradox Rift is going to be the most meta-shaking set in the history of the Pokemon trading card game. Yeah, I said it. Launching in PTCGL on Thursday, November 2nd, Paradox Rift will completely change how you play the game, mostly thanks to the evil menace known as Iron Hands EX. But while that's getting all of the attention, there's several other decks out of the set that will be either Tier 1 or Tier 2. So in this video, I'll be showing you what I consider to be the best of the best in Paradox Rift. In my previous video about the best 151 decks, I included the list in the description. Because there's a character limit though, I'll now be putting the different deck lists in the comments. This also allows you to reply to the various lists and offer up any suggestions you have to improve them. Or you can just tell me how brilliant I am. Both trick the algorithm into promoting the video, so the choice is yours. There's no point in delaying this. Iron Hands EX is the best card, the best deck, and would be the best Pokemon if it was Iron Feet instead of Iron Hands. So instead of you skipping to the end of the video to find out what number 1 is, I'll get things off on the right foot and cover it right now. Where do I even begin with Iron Hands? Well, I guess the attack. For 4 energy, Ampu very much does 120 damage, but if you take a knockout, you get an extra prize card. If you were around for the dark days of ADPization, you know how insane this card is going to be. To put Ampu very much in perspective, here's a list of just some of the single prize Pokemon you can now KO for 2 prizes. Comfey, Cramorant, Sableye, Radiant Greninja, Ralts, Kirlia, Charmander, Pidgey, Manaphy, Bidoof, Bibarel, and Frigibax. So instead of needing 6 knockouts to win against a single prize heavy deck, you now only need 3. But it doesn't stop there. Lumineon V, Lugia V, Palkia V, Bombardier EX, and Squawkabilly EX are all weak to lightning. So all of a sudden these 2 prizes give up 3 prizes to the almighty Iron Hands, meaning you can win in as little as 2 turns. That's because you can KO one of those 2 prizes on turn 1, then use Echoing Horn and Bosses the following turn to literally win the game. Okay, so Iron Hands must have a weakness, right? It requires 4 energy to attack. Because of Electric Generator though, getting Iron Hands powered up will be super easy, barely an inconvenience. Even if you only hit 2 energy from all of your Jennies, you can still manually attach a double turbo energy. Sure, it reduces the damage to 100, but that's a great number nonetheless. While Electric Generator is the most obvious partner, don't forget you can also put in Flaffy to power up a fresh one, and Mirage Gate to use Iron Hands a little later in the game. Hell, people have even talked about putting basic lightning energy in Lugia to use the thing. Or there's also Charizard EX, or Xatu, or Garganacl. It's honestly crazy how many different decks Iron Hands can fit into. For the first build though, I'm just adapting a Miraidon Raikou list, focusing on getting a turn 1 attack off as consistently as possible, but also understanding that you need to have alternate attackers and added consistency with the sheep. The game plan is fairly straightforward. Try to get 4 energy on Iron Hands turn 1 and take a quick 2 prizes on something weak. Failing that, hit into a multi-prizer with Raikou V to potentially set it up for a 3-prize KO later on in the game. From there, the deck should run as well as Raikou V does right now. You can build up energy on your board to take a big KO with Raichu, use Iron Hands to take care of the weaker Pokemon, and use everybody else to help further your board position. Alternate cards you'll want to think about for this list include Pokestop, Choice Belt, Mew from Celebrations, Canceling Cologne for any pesky Mimikyu, and Counter Catcher, as well as Future Booster Energy Capsules so Iron Hands can deal extra damage, even though it doesn't really help out the math. But Iron Hands gets even more insane. So you know how it only does 120 damage, meaning a 200 hit point Pokemon should be safe? Well, I've got some bad news for you. In fact, I've got lots of bad news for you. Regieleki, VMAX, Ludicolo, Zapdos, and Kingambit can all boost the amount of damage Iron Hands EX deals. With 4 Regieleki VMAX in play, all of a sudden Iron Hands is doing 240 damage. That's knocking out nearly every basic Pokemon in the game. And don't forget that Lugia V-Star, Palkia V-Star, and Pidgeot EX are weak to lightning. So for the second version of Iron Hands, we're focusing on doing as much damage as possible. Regieleki VMAX is the partner I went with here, going with a 3-3 line for a potential boost of 90 extra damage. The added spaces needed for Regieleki do hurt your potential turn 1 explosiveness, but with 3 Regieleki VMAX in play and a Future Booster Energy Capsule attached to Iron Hands, Ampu very much does 230 damage. So not even Arceus V is safe from the Lightning Boy. And for the Ludicolo version, I just adapted an old Suicune V Ludicolo list. Obviously Iron Hands gobbles up more energy than Suicune, so you'll have to use your resources carefully. Like, super duper carefully. Like, if one thing goes wrong, this deck is terrible, but if everything goes right, this deck is insane. The list you're seeing right now is definitely something you'll want to play around with a little bit. 3 Ludicolo might not be necessary, as 2 could be enough to win you the game. But this is mainly meant to show you how Iron Hands can fit into so many different decks, each with their own gimmick. And here's a version that's beginning to pick up steam. Get it? Because you can turn water into steam? Never mind. If you're looking for alternate ways to power up Iron Hands outside of Electric Generator and Flaffy, look no further than Baxcalibur. Chen Pao has been a good deck since it was released, and now you can jam an Iron Hands in there to make it better. Chen Pao allows you to take out big HP Pokemon, Radiant Greninja can snipe 2 bench Pokemon, and Iron Hands can give you extra prize cards. But Mr. Handsome Pilot, sir, I hear you say, how can I win with just 2 Lightning Energy? Since Chen Pao already plays superior energy retrieval, getting any lost energy back into your hand will be a breeze. Looking at comments in the Poke Twitter world, everyone's saying this will be the best version of Iron Hands you can play. We'll have to wait until November 2nd to see if that's true, but it's kind of insane just how easily Iron Hands slots into Chen Pao without messing up the strategy. I was going to stop at 3 versions of Iron Hands, but the Lost Zone build is so easy to make that not even my laziness could prevent me from throwing it in here. It's basically the exact same list as Turbo Lost Box with Dragonite V and Raikou V, except now there's Iron Hands instead. As has happened to me on stream before, it is possible to get 7 cards in the Lost Zone turn 1 going second, through 3 Comfey, 1 Colress, and a Lost Vacuum to get rid of your own tool or stadium. Regardless of whether it happens turn 1 or 2, you use 2 Mirage Gate to fully power up Iron Hands, then make an annoying deck even more annoying. And you always have Radiant Greninja as a backup attacker should you want to hit the bench. It's not an understatement to say that this one card is going to create a massive shift in the meta. I'm predicting that we'll see a bigger focus on basic V and EX decks, because evolution decks will be at the mercy of Iron Hands if a single prizer is left alone in the active. But how do you plan on playing Iron Hands? Will you try a crazy combo like Charizard EX or Xatu or Garganacl? Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments. In pretty much any other Pokemon card set, Gholdengo EX would be the #1 deck. But thanks to Iron Hands, the cheese string Pokemon is relegated to second best. Functioning similarly to Chen Pao, but not really, Gholdengo EX does 50 damage for each basic energy card you discard from your hand, all for a single metal energy. While there's several ways to play Gholdengo, they all have the same base. 4 Gimmighoul, at least 3 Gholdengo EX, a Radiant Greninja, and a bunch of ways to recover your energy from the discard pile. The general consensus from Japan seems to be 4 superior energy retrieval and 2 energy retrieval with at least 1 super rod thrown in for good measure. Earthen Vessel isn't available in Japan yet, but it's definitely a better option than Letter of Encouragement, allowing you to discard any useless Battle VIP pass later on in the game while also digging out any energy left in your deck. In this first version, you'll be running a full 4/4 line of Gholdengo. Japanese lists can't really seem to decide on which Gimmighoul is the best though. The 50 hit point one has the Call for Family attack and a 1 retreat cost, but the 70 hit point one has 70 hit points. So it's dealer's choice on which ghoul you think will rule. Overall, if you're better at math than I am, the deck is super easy to play. You just get as many basics down turn 1 as possible, not caring about how much energy you're discarding along the way, then hit hard on turn 2 with Gholdengo, discarding energy from your hand as needed. Even though Pokestop is a lie, it allows you to quickly draw into your energy retrievals, bringing back that energy you just discarded. If you'd like a single prize backup attacker that can survive a hit from Iron Hands, Scizor slots well into the deck. If they play a bunch of ability Pokemon, you can punish them with your Scissors, dealing 10 plus 50 for each Pokemon with an ability, all for a single energy. It's just a great way to prevent your opponent from easily taking 3 KOs on your Gholdengo to win the game, and it offers you a safety net if you have a bad turn somewhere along the line. If you'd like a single prize backup attacker that can't survive a hit from Iron Hands, but can deal a good chunk of damage and help your early game setup, Basculegion slots well into the deck. The baby fish attacks for free and puts 2 basic Pokemon onto your bench, while Basculegion does 20 damage for each basic energy in your discard pile, but it does shuffle those energy back into your deck. Your opponent can't play around Basculegion like they can with Scizor, but giving up an easy 2 prizes to Iron Hands is never going to be a good thing. I'm also using this list to show some of the alternate strategies with Gholdengo. Since Pokestop is the best stadium for the deck, running Cross Switcher is a good idea, allowing you to gust up any Pokemon by using 2 of them at once. Then there's Irida to get a water Pokemon and an item, Lady to get 4 energy out of your deck and into your hand, and Adaman, which discards 2 metal energy from your hand and gets you any 2 cards from your deck. If you really want to whack off, you can play Gholdengo with Palkia V-Star. Because Gholdengo can discard any basic energy from your hand, not just metal, Palkia V-Star works as a backup attacker who can deal a good amount of damage without draining your resources. The lightning weakness of Palkia is a huge liability in an Iron Hands world though, so if you see your opponent playing with something that's as hard as metal, keep your Space Dragon tucked away. But the added benefit of being able to attack with Radiant Greninja can't be ignored. Otherwise, it's a fairly typical Gholdengo list. There is a 1-1 Bibarel line to increase your draw even further, and if you want to get super spicy, you could swap out the Lost Vacuum for Counter Catcher, catching your opponent off guard when you're behind on prizes. Where Gholdengo was all about hitting as hard as possible, Garchomp EX is all about dinking and dunking. Ignoring the fact that Garchomp is weak to lightning and is a stage 2 in a meta where that's very bad, this deck has a lot of potential, though you do have to rely on Cheryl. And as we all know, I hate Cheryl. There's no other way to put it, she just never shows up for work. But that doesn't mean I won't give her another chance. For now, Garchomp's second attack doesn't exist, just focus on the first one, which does 160 damage for a single fighting energy. That alone is decent, but the effect of the attack is kind of nuts, allowing you to attach up to 3 basic fighting energy from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. So once you get a Garchomp up and running, you want to use Hydrolander for 160, then move energy to your bench Pokemon so they can attack the following turn. Then, hope your active Garchomp survives a hit, retreat it for free, Cheryl off the damage, then attack with a fully healed Pokemon. Looping Garchomp will be your best strategy, but you can throw in pretty much any fighting type into the deck, as well as any colorless Pokemon, or the craziest among you will realize that Iron Hands EX kinda pairs with Garchomp. For this first build though, we'll be focusing on the Lucario from Brilliant Stars. Aura Sphere Volley does 10 plus 60 for each fighting energy you discard. The ability also powers up Lucario at the cost of putting 2 damage counters on it, meaning you can one-shot an Iron Hands with Lucario after a manual attachment and a Roaring Resolve. That's probably the best way to go about the Iron Hands matchup. Completely ignore Garchomp and just focus on Lucario. Otherwise, use Garchomp and Cheryl to avoid getting knocked out while also chipping away at your opponent's Pokemon. Or sacrifice a Garchomp to build up a crazy Lucario since 5 energy is enough to do 310 damage. Because you're almost guaranteed to go behind on prizes with any build of Garchomp EX, you may want to add Counter Catcher to your list. And if you really want to get risky, Pidgeot EX is another lightning weak stage 2 Pokemon that can fit into Garchomp. For the second build, Garchomp gets paired up with Arceus V-Star. This means you now have 2 solid attackers, both of whom can put energy on the field. And, you know, Arceus' V-Star power gets you any 2 cards from your deck, which is always awesome. Cheryl should come up big in this version of the deck, able to heal both Garchomp and Arceus, but because of Iron Hands, you need a basic fighting type attacker. That's where Teriyaki Man comes into play. For 3 energy, it can one-shot Iron Hands while also protecting itself from damage the following turn. Escape Route, Boss's Orders, and even Iron Bundle will be annoying, moving Terrakion out of the active, but if it sticks, it could buy you a crucial turn. And finally, since Terrakion is such a good attacker, this list focuses on it a bit more. Not only do you play 2 copies, but there's a Koraidon EX as well. This way, you don't have to solely rely on Garchomp EX to power up a Terrakion. At the end of your first turn, you can use Koraidon's ability to accelerate 2 fighting energy from your discard pile to a Terrakion and then attack with it on turn 2. All while you're building up a Garchomp EX on the bench. As I was building these Garchomp decks, it became clear that it's impossible to know where Garchomp will fit into the Paradox Rift meta. Iron Hands is shaping up to dominate the entire game, and one-shotting a Garchomp EX isn't too difficult for it. But if Iron Hands stumbles even a little bit, one of your fighting type attackers can wipe it out, potentially leaving them with no response the following turn. That leads me to the next question. How do you think Garchomp will fare once Paradox Rift is out next week? Let everyone know in the comments. And finally, we have Roaring Moon EX, easily the deck I'm most excited for. Sure, Iron Hands is going to get all the attention, but Roaring Moon is the hot sister no one pays attention to because she likes horses an unhealthy amount. For 3 energy, Roaring Moon instantly KOs every Pokemon in the game, putting 200 damage on itself in the process, except those who are protected against the effects of attacks. So cards like Espeon VMAX and Toedscruel EX could present a major problem. If those aren't on the field though, Roaring Moon is super powerful and makes a case for choosing to go second instead of first. That's because it relies heavily on Professor Sada's vitality to put energy into play. Effectively a double Melanie, Professor Sada attaches a basic energy from your discard pile to up to 2 of your ancient Pokemon, then draws you 3 cards. After using Sada and manually attaching an energy, all you have to do is play Dark Patch and suddenly your Roaring Moon is good to go. There aren't a whole lot of ways to play Roaring Moon. Number 1 PTCGL fan Andrew Mahone created a list that is all about getting that turn 1 attack, and it's what you're seeing right now. Pokestop helps you get items, Earth and Vessel puts energy into your discard pile, and Mew EX and Squawkabilly EX draw you as many cards as possible. But don't think that Roaring Moon is a one-trick ponyta. If one-shotting another Pokemon isn't a good idea, it can still deal 220 damage for 3 energy. And with Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, it has 290 hit points. Yeah, this thing is a beast. For other options, you could include Darkrai V-Star or Forest Sealstone to have access to a V-Star power. Moltres V with Energy Switch is another option, but it kinda clogs up the deck more than necessary. And Item-Based Gust might be a good idea since you'll likely want to use Professor Sada most turns. So don't be afraid to throw in Pokemon Catcher, Counter Catcher, or Cross Switcher if you're having trouble knocking out the right Pokemon. Now I'm going to do something I've never done before. Look people in the eyes when they're wearing sandals. Also, I'm going to talk about a couple of expanded decks. Even though PTCGL is nearly 2 years old, we're still waiting on XY and Black and White cards in Expanded. Because of that, we're missing a lot of key cards like Skyfield, Versus Seeker, Battle Compressor, and Special Charge. That also means something like ADP is missing Double Dragon Energy, which takes it to a whole nother level. Still, you can create some insane expanded decks with Paradox Rift, starting with ADP Iron Hands. ADP in PTCGL's Expanded is fairly simple. Do a million things turn 1 to try and get Altered Creation off, then use Ultimate Ray the following turn to deal 180 damage and spread around 3 basic energy from your deck. Path to the Peak is obviously a major concern for ADP, and you might run out of steam after a couple of turns, but that's by design. ADP is meant to win the game in 3 turns. With Iron Hands EX, that doesn't really change, but now you can beat single prize expanded decks a turn earlier. After using Altered Creation, Iron Hands does 150 damage and takes 2 extra prize cards. Choice Belt allows you to one-shot something like Crobat V, and you can include Future Booster Energy Capsule or Choice Band to deal with weaker GXs. I also threw in Mew EX and Marshadow GX to give you alternate attackers, because why not? Ultimately, this is going to be a super oppressive deck in Expanded. You just might want to play with yourself a little and decide if sacrificing a bit of consistency is worth it to deal with Path to the Peak. If you want to play a straight Lightning deck in Expanded, Iron Hands pairs extremely well with Pikachu and Zekrom. In addition to Electric Generator, Iron Hands now gets Tapu Koko, Prism Star, Thunder Mountain, and Electro Power. Electro Power is just Power Tablet for Lightning types, meaning if you play 4, suddenly Iron Hands can deal a massive 240 damage and take an extra prize card. There's definitely some similarities between this version and the ADP one, but that's because they're both focused on spreading around a ton of energy and hitting hard, while also maybe potentially taking extra prize cards. And finally, we have Iron Valiant EX. I'll be talking about Iron Valiant in Standard with my upcoming Rogue deck video, but it deserves to be mentioned here as it represents the return of Turn 1 Donk decks in a major way. If you ever played Expanded on PTCGO, you no doubt ran into a Turn 1 Donk deck. Basically, the pilot of the Donk deck would choose to go first, then spend the next 5 minutes playing cards to try and one-shot your lone active Pokemon. It's super fun to play, super annoying to play against. And Iron Valiant revives this horrible archetype. I'll admit that I didn't whack off too hard when it came to building this. It's basically just a deck of a lot of switch cards, 4 Iron Valiant, 4 Scoop Up Net, and 4 Super Scoop Up. The goal is to use Iron Valiant's ability as many times as possible, but because Expanded makes sense, Scoop Up Net also works on Mew EX, so if you need to draw more cards, that option is also available. My math is never correct, but if I counted correctly, using Iron Valiant's ability 6 times, plus Pheromosa GX with a Beast Energy attached means you deal 180 damage before your opponent even plays the game. So if they start a single Pokemon with 180 hit points or less, you have a good chance of winning. This deck is going to make Expanded even more of a toxic wasteland than it already is, but since I was the guy who popularized that Raichu spread deck, I figured I may as well make PTCGL's second of 2 game modes even more unbearable. You're welcome. And there you have it. A bunch of new Paradox Rift decks that should be extremely powerful on PTCGL when the set goes live on Thursday, November 2nd at 10 AM Pacific. I'll be streaming Paradox Rift nearly every day beginning at 2 PM Pacific, but if you miss it, highlights of the best games will be uploaded here.